Welcome back. Oh, well, you're already hearing some of our guests. Welcome back. Plastic usage has formed part of our daily life, from home to work and school. I mean, we drink water, we eat and all of that.
Pure water, plastic bottles.
Even in pure water too. But the indiscriminate disposal after use has caused a great damage to the environment over the years. I mean, it said that it takes about 500 years for a particular plastic to decompose, and it still doesn't decompose. It just breaks down into tinier particles and then seeps into the aquifer. According to the United Nations, 30 million tons of plastics are generated in the world in a year, out of which more than 8 million tons end up in the oceans. These plastics are eaten up by sea animals, which result in their killings as well as, or in their deaths, as well as becomes detrimental to the health of humans who consume them. Epidemics caused by plastics stimulate the theme for this year's World Environment Day, Beat Plastic Pollution.
So we're all eating fish and shrimp that has eaten plastic. In other words, we are eating plastic.
If you actually go check yourself, you might find out that you have some level of plastics in your system.
Well, put that way, we need to pay attention.
No, seriously, we need to. Okay, so to help us look at all of this, we have in the studio Dr. Muktari Aminu-Kano, Director General, Chief Operating Officer of the Nigerian Conservation Foundation. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Also in the studio is Dr. Paul Abolo, an environmental strategist. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, Mr. Strategist, let me begin with you.
You should strategy us through.
Please.
Through the process.
This matter of plastics in our system. When I say system here, I'm not just talking about the environment, even in us. How did we get this far?
We got this far because we are not keeping our eyes on the relationship between man and plastic. You know, plastic is an incredible invention and it's made life a lot easier for us. So we got into this relationship, and along the line, we failed to manage the relationship properly. So the complexities associated with the relationship is what we are going through now. And I'll tell you that the best way to deal with this is to re-examine the relationship and then reset the relationship. And once we reset the relationship, we'll find that we can manage the relationship better. I'll explain to you. The issue is not the plastic. The issue is the pollution that comes out of the way we dump the plastics. So in the oceans, for example, we have 8 million tons of plastics every year in the ocean. And this causes about $8 billion in damage. So you can imagine 8 million tons causing the damage of $8 billion. The ratio is 1 to 100. So that means that for 1 ton of plastic, you're causing the damage of 360,000 naira. So talking about the relationship now, we need to see how much is that 1 ton, which is about 70,000 naira in the market, and it's causing a damage of 360,000 naira. In fixing this relationship, you need to up the value of the plastic, of the waste plastics, so that you can bring about a behavioral change, a cultural change, going back to the relationship on how we need to collect the plastics and reposition the plastics for recycling. So now the plastics don't have value. That is why the plastics are dumped indiscriminately. Yeah. Increase the value, you get the plastics out of those places.
Now, Doctor, is there a sense in which governments at various levels now need to legislate on how we dispose of our plastics? Because, I mean, it looks like we can't live without plastics, but the issue is our means or our ways of disposing of them.
Thank you very much, Aliru. I think before I get to what government can do, I just want to chip in about really how we got here. And just to say that I think we got into this distorted relationship with plastic the same way we got into poor relationship with other aspects of the environment. The question is convenience for today, The question is ease of having things, and the question is cheap, supposedly cheap products. So we've developed a habit of when something is convenient, we use it without thinking of what the effect and impact will be in future. And as long as my life is easier today and there is no cost, big cost in money to me, then I don't really look at what, I don't look at what happens to my children or their children or what happens even in the next 10 years or so. So that is the whole attitude and behavioral change that is needed, that change of mindset before we can address all environmental problems. Now back to your question about what the government can do. There is a lot of legislation on different things to do with the environment in Nigeria. And one of the major issues is really proper enforcement and implementation of those legislation. However, in particular relating to plastics, there are a few gaps in terms of the legislation. And some of those gaps are that because plastic is really litter gone on steroids, it's just there is too much of it. There is some toxin or poison associated with some of it. And also, as Neota said, that it doesn't decompose quickly. Some of it goes beyond 500 years to 1,000 years before it decomposes. And then it's just everywhere. It's so ubiquitous. So that spatial characteristic of plastic where because it's too much, because it has some toxin, and because it takes a long time to degrade, means that we might need legislation separate from normal waste management legislation. And it may not necessarily be a ban, it may be a tax, it may be creating the regulatory and policy environment to make sure that we encourage people to recycle, use less, and do the 5 R's, as they say, which is to refuse, reduce, reuse, recycle, and repurpose. So we might need to encourage all of that and provide the enabling environment from the government side to address the issue. But it's beyond government. We as individuals also have something to do, and the private sector has something to do, and civil society in general has something to do to address this almost epidemic.
Okay. Mr. Abolo, let me ask you a question arising from what he just said. Recycling plastic, how difficult is it? And how is it that people are not going into it, that we find plastics littering the streets, the gutters, the waterways?
Recycling plastic is not a difficult process.
Is it expensive?
It's not expensive. The issue is you need to find plastics to recycle.
But there's plenty all over the place.
Yes, but you need to incentivize it. You need to put some money in it, some value in it to make people want to collect the plastics. The behavioral change we're talking about, it's not really about legislation as such, because once you put in money in it, like we're doing with the climate change, you incentivize it, you'll find that people will want to collect the plastics. You need to collect the plastics first before you recycle the plastics. And the plastics are all over the place, and nobody wants to collect it because the plastic sells for about 70,000 naira per ton. So it makes no sense. If, for example, today, you decide that for each plastic bottle, each PET bottle you bring, you get 20 naira. A guy knocks on your window, on your car window on the highway, and they're asking for alms. They will not ask you for your plastic bottle, because when they collect 10 plastic bottles, they have 200 naira there. That's a meal.
Yeah.
You know, so back to what he's talking about, legislation, you cannot enforce, you cannot implement, you cannot do if you do not increase the value. And that is why you have it all over the place. Once you increase the value, you push people to engage in a behavioral change that will stay there and become part of our culture.